Have you ever had this happen? Like you walk into a completely ordinary room, or maybe you just touch an everyday object in your house.
Right.
It could be, the cool, smooth ceramic of your coffee mug or the worn curve of a wooden banister as you're walking downstairs. And out of nowhere, you are just hit with this sudden, unexplainable wave of sorrow.
Oh, yeah. Or longing.
Exactly, longing. It's this feeling so incredibly heavy, it actually catches in your throat. You stop and you try to trace it back to a logical thought or a specific memory, but there is absolutely nothing there, just like a ghost of an emotion hanging in the air.
And, we brush that off all the time. We tell ourselves we're just tired or stressed, or maybe we didn't sleep well the night before.
Right, just blame the caffeine.
Exactly. But the reality is far more complex. That sudden wave of emotion isn't random. It's a signal. I mean, it's a leak in a very sophisticated containment system that your mind built a really long time ago.
So today's deep dive is dedicated to understanding that exact containment system. We are unpacking a genuinely fascinating, incredibly poetic source text today. It tackles Freudian dream theory and the architecture of the unconscious mind.
And it is a fascinating text.
It really is. The mission of this deep dive is to use this text as a map. We're going to decode the mysterious ways our minds bury our deepest truths and our earliest childhood wounds right in plain sight.
Yeah, and it's important to note right off the bat that this source material, it doesn't read like a clinical textbook.
No, not at all.
There are no dry medical charts here. It's written almost like a surreal piece of fiction. It essentially asks you to step out of your logical waking mind for a bit.
Yeah, you really have to let go of the literal interpretations, because the author places you immediately inside a metaphor.
Right. You are asked to imagine standing in, and I love this phrasing, a room that is not a room but the memory of one.
So evocative.
It is. And within this space, your attention is drawn to a dark spot on the wall. Now, the text is very particular about this spot. It describes it not as a physical stain, but as an absence that carries immense weight.
Like a heavy void.
Yes. The phrasing used is time itself coagulating, and a clot in the bloodstream of memory.
I kept reading that line over and over. A clot in the bloodstream of memory. It paints such a vivid picture of something getting stuck and, slowly gathering mass. But my initial thought was that this spot must represent a repressed memory, like a locked safe in the brain where a specific traumatic event is hidden away until you're ready to deal with it.
And that is the common cultural assumption, right?
Yeah.
That's how we think the unconscious works. But the text argues something fundamentally different.
Oh.
The spot does not hide a specific dramatic event. It is a container for a memory. The spot is the shape of the hiding itself.
The shape of the hide.
Exactly. The author explains the mind builds rooms within rooms to store what cannot be spoken. The spot is the architectural evidence of that construction.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because I was thinking about it like, okay, imagine painting over a crack in the wall of an old house.
Right.
You don't have the tools to fix the foundation, so you just patch it with a thick layer of paint. And then a few years later, you paint over it again.
Good and again.
Right, you do this for decades. Eventually, there are so many thick, hardened layers of paint that the paint actually becomes the crack. The concealment itself becomes the main feature of the wall.
That is a perfect analogy.
It's no longer about what's hidden behind the plaster.
Yeah.
That heavy lump of paint is the physical history of you trying to hide it.
That gets right to the mechanics of it. The mind folds a moment inward because the emotional weight of that moment was simply too heavy for the psychological architecture you had at the time. It would have broken the wall. Precisely.
Yeah.
And the text emphasizes that the moments that cause this aren't necessarily cinematic traumas. We aren't just talking about massive, undeniable instances of violence or loss. We're usually talking about something painfully quiet. The text says, it's a glance withheld, a touch withdrawn, a word swallowed at the exact moment it might have changed everything.
A glance withheld. I mean, that is so small, objectively.
It seems small to us now.
Yeah, if I try to put myself in the shoes of a child, I can imagine waiting for a parent to look up from a newspaper or, a phone nowadays, just wanting them to witness me doing something I'm proud of.
And they don't look up.
Right. And as an adult, you rationalize that. You say, well, they were busy, they were tired. But the text seems to suggest that for a child, that non-event carries a devastating weight.
It truly does. To a fragile ego, whether it's a child's ego or even an adult in a moment of profound vulnerability, that withheld glance can feel like the withdrawal of life support.
Wow.
It's a truth too heavy to integrate into your understanding of the world. If your literal survival depends on this caregiver, you cannot consciously process the idea that they might be indifferent to you.
So your brain steps in.
Yes, your mind performs an act of mercy. It chooses to bury the emotion rather than bear it. It stores it in that spot on the wall, allowing the feeling to exist in isolation without demanding that you completely rewrite your reality to accommodate it.
But if the mind goes through all this trouble to bury these heavy emotions in the spot, it obviously can't just leave them there silently.
No, the pressure would build up.
Exactly. It has to leak out somehow, which brings us back to that sudden wave of sorrow we talked about at the beginning. I really want to look at how we actually experience this hidden data.
We should, because it's fascinating.
Because the source material claims this spot contains the sensory alphabet of a desire too dangerous to name directly.
The word sensory is the key there. When this buried material bubbles up, it doesn't come with a neat narrative. The unconscious writes in raw textures and atmospheric shifts.
Like what?
Well, the text lists specific visceral triggers. The scent of rain hitting hot pavement, mechanical sound of a zipper being pulled slowly down, the friction of silk against skin.
Oh, I see.
Or the sharp metallic taste of copper in your mouth from biting your lip to keep from crying.
Every single one of those examples is completely devoid of context.
Completely.
There is no who, when, or why attached to the smell of rain or the taste of copper. It's just raw data. But this is where I find myself tripping up on the logic of it all.
How so?
Well, if these quiet moments, the swallowed word, the withheld glance, are so foundational to our psychological makeup, why wouldn't the brain just file away the actual story? Why go through the incredibly complex process of encrypting a childhood rejection into the smell of hot pavement?
Think of your conscious awareness as an intensely bright, burning light, and your ego is a highly sensitive security system.
Okay.
If you remember the actual narrative, the specific humiliating story of your profound vulnerability and rejection, the intense light of your conscious mind would immediately try to scorch it away.
Because it's too painful.
Right. The ego would flood you with crushing shame, or it would aggressively rationalize it to make it acceptable.
I see. So the conscious mind would say, hey, you're an adult. Stop whining about your dad not looking at your drawing 20 years ago.
Exactly.
It would minimize the pain to protect the ego.
Exactly. And the text makes this very point. These raw sensations represent pure potential before they are mangled into acceptable adult narratives.
Pure potential.
Yeah. Before a feeling is allowed to become a recognizable ambition or a romantic preference, it is just a raw pulse of need. The unconscious encrypts this need into temperatures, textures, and half-remembered smells, because that is the only language that can slip past the ego's firewall undetected.
That is brilliant.
It preserves the terrifying feeling of being small in a world that didn't notice your smallness, but it disguises it in a sensory detail, so it doesn't trigger your psychological defenses.
Which means we need to talk about the translation software the brain is using to do this.
Yes, the dream work.
Right. How does a feeling of being small turn into the smell of rain? The source dives heavily into Freudian dream work here. It outlines two specific mechanisms the mind uses to take an unbearable feeling and disguise it as a harmless object.
Condensation and displacement.
Right. Let's start with displacement.
Displacement is the more straightforward of the two. It's the act of taking the intense emotional energy from its true source and moving it, displacing it onto a safer, related form.
Okay, so moving the energy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the text offers beautiful examples of this translation. A swallowed cry becomes the shape of a keyhole.
A keyhole.
A sob becomes the curve of a vase. A scream becomes the hollow of a cage.
That is so poetic.
The mind takes the physical shape of the emotion, the hollow of an open mouth screaming, and maps it onto a landscape feature that shares that geometry but carries none of the threat.
Wow. It also gives the example of a young boy who desperately wants his mother's attention, but that desire feels too dangerous or complex to hold directly.
Right.
So his mind displaces that longing onto the sweeping curve of a hill in a landscape painting.
It's incredible.
He grows up obsessed with rolling hills, never realizing he is just looking at the shape of a mother's shoulder.
And that leads us to the second mechanism, which is condensation. If displacement is moving the energy, condensation is compressing it.
Like a zip file.
Exactly like creating a zip file on your computer. Your brain might take the fear of abandonment, the lingering anger at being ignored, the guilt of feeling needy, and the terror of independence.
That's a lot of files.
It is. And it compresses all of those conflicting massive files into a single, incredibly dense symbol.
See, here's where it gets really interesting for me. I always thought dreaming about a key or a door just meant, new opportunities.
Right, the generic dream dictionary definition.
Exactly, the kind of thing you read online. But this text makes it sound far more literal and much heavier.
It really does.
It argues that a door isn't a metaphor for opportunity at all. It is the actual, literal threshold between who you were and who you could have been, compressed into wood and brass. And a key isn't a symbol of access. It is the cold metal weight of a specific choice you never made.
Because the unconscious doesn't traffic in generic symbols.
Yeah.
It builds custom, hyperdense ZIP files. When you dream of that key, you are feeling the actual condensed emotional weight of your own history.
The raw truth wearing a costume.
Exactly. And to explain how we navigate this, the author introduces this striking metaphor. The mind approaches these truths sideways, like a crab moving toward the sea.
It never faces the water directly, but its entire body is oriented by the gravity of the ocean.
Ah, I love that image. You're scuttling along the sand, seemingly focused on the beach umbrellas of the boardwalk, but your whole existence is being pulled by the water right beside you.
Yes, that constant pull.
In waking life, that scuttling is us focusing on our careers, our hobbies, the landscape paintings we buy, the specific texture of a coat we insist on wearing.
We take this unbearable internal intensity and scatter it across the landscape of harmless objects in our day-to-day lives. Now, if we follow that crab all the way to the water, if we trace all these displaced objects, these condensed symbols and swallowed cries back to their ultimate origin, we reach the deepest layer of the spot on the wall.
The very bottom.
Yeah. And the text reveals that at the very bottom, there isn't a memory of an event at all. There is a sensation that predates our ability to form memories.
It describes this deepest layer as the taste of milk and salt. The warmth of a body against yours before you even had the cognitive ability to know that bodies were separate things.
That is wild to think about.
It is the primal wound. But the profound insight the author offers here is that this primal wound is not born of malice or abuse.
It's just life.
Right. It is, quite simply, ordinary growing up. It is the terrifying oceanic bliss of being a completely helpless infant, entirely dependent on a larger being for your survival, and then inevitably experiencing what the text calls the slow cooling of attention.
The slow cooling of attention. In plain English, that's just the reality of a caregiver having to put the baby down to go wash the dishes. It's not a door slamming in your face. It's just the world making its larger demands known. The caregiver replaces your totalizing immediate needs with the realities of life.
It's the slow realization that the person holding you has an entire universe outside of holding you.
It's devastating, honestly.
It is devastating, but it is the necessary abandonment that allows a self to form.
Right, because if they never put you down...
If that attention never cooled, if the caregiver remained perfectly, permanently attuned to your every micro-expression forever, you would never individuate.
You'd just be an extension of them.
You would never develop a boundary between where you end and the rest of the world begins. You have to be dropped, metaphorically speaking, to learn how to stand. But that necessary separation leaves a permanent residue, a hollow space in the architecture of your mind.
It's almost like experiencing phantom limb syndrome, but for your personality.
Oh, that is a great way to put it.
That foundational piece of total, undivided attention was severed so early in your cognitive development that you don't even remember having it. But your brain keeps sending electrical signals to a part of you that isn't there anymore.
It keeps trying to grasp onto things to stop the itching.
Yeah.
That phantom limb analogy captures the compulsion perfectly.
Yeah.
Because of that severed connection, the brain keeps trying to map its old infantile blueprint onto new environments.
Seeking out that old feeling.
The text states that we spend the rest of our lives seeking in others what we first knew in the arms of those who couldn't hold us forever. We project that hollow space onto our reality.
We look for it in romantic partners, expecting them to anticipate our needs without us having to speak.
Yes.
We look for it in flawless careers, hoping the applause of an industry will finally fill the hollow. We constantly reach out to grab things to attach to that phantom limb, completely unaware that the piece we're desperately looking for was left behind in a crib 20 or 30 years ago.
And the most crucial takeaway the source offers regarding this dynamic is how we ought to view this endless cycle of searching.
How so?
It emphasizes that this repetition, this exhausting pattern of reaching for connection, mapping our childhood needs onto an adult partner, and finding only fragments of what we want, is not a pathology.
It's not a sickness.
No.
Yeah.
It is not a psychological failure on your part that needs to be medicated or fixed.
The text calls it maintaining fidelity to the first truth of your body.
I love that phrase.
To translate that out of the poetry, it means your brain is doing exactly what it was programmed to do as an infant. Your alarm system is just ringing from a fire that happened decades ago.
Exactly.
Which is honestly a massive relief to hear. Because when you keep hitting the same wall in your relationships or your ambitions, it feels like a personal failure. It feels like you're broken.
But the text insists that the pattern isn't the problem. The pattern is the path.
The path.
It is the very structure through which your growth happens. Every time you reach for a partner and feel that quiet, inevitable ache of adult dissatisfaction, you are touching the edge of that original unfillable hollow. You are tracing the outline of your own foundation.
So what does this all mean for us? If you're listening to this right now, what are you supposed to do the next time you encounter this heavy, unexplainable feeling?
That's the big question.
Right. The next time you touch a ceramic cup and feel like crying, I always thought of repressed emotions as toxic waste.
Most people do.
Something you have to dig up, process, and clean out of your system to be healthy. But this source seems to treat the darkness as something entirely different.
It explicitly warns against trying to decode every strange dream or psychoanalyze every heavy mood until it is fixed. The text argues that this unconscious darkness is a sanctuary.
A sanctuary.
Yes, it's a specialized holding environment for the things that are too big for language. It uses the metaphor of a tree to explain this relationship. It says that this darkness is compost for your roots.
Compost. That completely flips the toxic waste idea on its head.
It really does.
Compost isn't poison. It's dead matter that breaks down to create heat and essential nutrients. It's the engine of growth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just as the root system of a massive oak tree must remain in absolute suffocating darkness to feed the branches that are reaching up for the sun, your psychological roots require this hidden darkness.
The compost of your past hurts.
Your swallowed words, your necessary abandonments, it all must remain beneath the soil to anchor you and nourish whatever you're growing into above ground. The spot on the wall is your compost. It's a necessary functional darkness.
There is a line toward the end of the text that really cements this. It says, "What we call shadow is simply light traveling a longer path to reach us."
Oh, that's beautiful.
It reframes the whole concept of the unconscious. The shadow isn't a monster hiding in the basement of your brain waiting to sabotage your life.
No.
It's a companion, a highly efficient archivist proving that you are a complex organism made of both light that reaches and darkness that receives.
The author is trying to guide the reader toward a pivotal reorientation here. The only question worth asking when you feel that phantom ache isn't, what specific trauma does this mean?
Right.
But rather, what does it feel like to stand here in this soft dark and simply be known by my own mind?
Just to witness it.
Yes, it's an invitation to stop fighting your own architecture, to respect the act of hiding as a brilliant, merciful survival mechanism that your mind performed to keep you safe.
To realize that carrying this darkness isn't a burden, but a form of grace.
A form of grace, yes.
Wow, let's pull all of this together.
Yeah.
We started by walking into a room and noticing the spot on the wall, that coagulated absence that represents the mind's architecture of concealment. We decoded the sensory firewall, learning that our deepest vulnerabilities bypass our ego by wearing the raw textures of rain on pavement and silk against skin.
We observed the crab moving sideways. We examined how the mind uses the ZIP files of condensation and the map geometry of displacement to hide our unbearable truths in the harmless shapes of keys, doors, and landscape paintings.
And then we traced those symbols all the way back to the water's edge, finding the primal wound of the slow cooling of attention.
We recognize that the phantom limb of our infantile need makes us reach for things in adulthood, not because we are broken, but because we are maintaining fidelity to our first truth.
And ultimately, we learned to view that original hollow as the compost of our growth, the dark sanctuary where our roots are anchored.
It profoundly changes how you view your own inner life. It gives you permission to let the mystery remain a mystery.
It really does.
Yeah.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you step back into your day.
Please do.
We began this deep dive by talking about the sudden weight of touching a wooden banister or a porcelain cup. The next time you find yourself inexplicably captivated by something quiet, maybe it's the specific silence between nights in a jazz song, or the peculiar, heavy slant of twilight across an empty room, don't brush it off as fatigue.
Don't ignore it.
Don't rush to turn on the lights or drown it out with noise. Pause for just a moment. Let the feeling hold you. And ask yourself what hidden part of your own unlived life is finally recognizing itself in the shadows.
A beautiful thought.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep reaching for the light, and we'll catch you next time.